20 years since I had to come to some sort of decision as what I should do about registering at the beginning, when I achieved the age of 18 in World War II. It's a very serious thing to have to consider. It can affect your life, and I'm 95 years old now, and it has affected mine in the decision which I made. So if there were similar circumstances arising, again, unfortunately, that conscription was brought in, I think anyone who decides to, or thinks they would like to become subject or objector, should consider it very seriously. It's a very serious decision, and it has to be arrived at with much thought. Now, what I thought before going on to my experiences as a conscientious objector during the war, obviously influences during my younger life must have had some effect on my decision. So I thought it was probably best to, first of all, before telling you about my personal past during the war, to give you an idea of my upbringing. Now, I really have to go back to my father and mother, who were pacifists in the First World War. My father spending over 3 years in prison, much of that time in solitary confinement in terrible conditions, and my mother supporting him, although she was only at that time his girlfriend, throughout the war. Now, when the war ended, World War I ended, of course, he was still in prison, but when he came out, as far as I can see from the dates, he must have almost immediately planned to marry my mother. And of course, they married in 1919, and in 1920, their first son was born. That's my brother, who's 4.5 years older than me, Clifford. And 4.5 years later, I came along in 1924. Now, our home was a very loving, happy home. I remember my young years were as happy as perhaps any child's could be. And as far as the education was concerned, we lived in a cotton town near Manchester, Radcliffe, and I went initially to a church school. Well, I think it was a congregational school it was called, until I was 10. Now, what had happened